see, it's important that we see one another now and again. That we see that we are the body of Christ, that as we pass the plate or as we walk forward for the Lord's Supper, as we sing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs to one another, that we actually do that now and again, that we have an awareness of one another, because we are the body of Christ. And there might be a temptation in the modern West to put forward the most beautiful and the most affluent and have them in the front, the most capable. But the body of Christ includes those who are not impressive, those who you would probably be nervous about them. You don't know what they're going to say if they get up in front of people. Think about this with me. How can we be a church that celebrates that we truly are a sort of Christophany when you look not at all the fancy stuff, but when you look at us? So think about these things, and let's open it up for discussion.
Yep.
I was just going to add to what you said. You started with the Screwtape quote, and Lewis says something very similar in God in the Dawn, talking about being a part of the local church and having to sing hymns, which when he started out, he didn't like the hymns. He said, but as I went on singing, I saw the great merit of it. I came up against people of different backgrounds, different outlooks, different education, and gradually my conceit began peeling off. And I realized that their hymns, which I still hated, were nevertheless being sung with devotion and benefit by an old saint in elastic side boots in the opposite pew. And then it dawns on you that you aren't fit to clean those boots.
That's pretty good.
Can I ask Aaron on the hospitality laws from Leviticus there in Acts 15?
Yeah.
Are you arguing for a continued application of that in the church today, or was it specific to the?
Yeah, I was actually trying to. That's where I lost my train of thought. I would have to reread what my article was, but I think what I was going after is generally like you get these classic interpretations of it that it's just like a perfunctory law for table fellowship, so we can eat together, as Peter runs into in Galatians, or Paul tells us. I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall for that, but I think that severely undermines it. I think it's actually it's raising the bar really high to the point that we have to trust Jesus alone for our salvation and cleanliness. I mean, we those are laws required of us, but we're not going to meet them, just like any of the law. It's a hospitality. That's the lens that I went through. It was a hospitality thing where the host pays the debt of the one hosted. This idea, but the one hosted also contributes back. So you have that interaction. The Jewish people are hosting the Gentiles, right? Grafting in. That Luke doesn't use grafting in. That's Paul, but that's the idea. And so they're hosting because they were once hosted, right? God's been hosting us since creation. And so that type of grace being poured out towards the Jewish people, then they're supposed to forgive that same thing. So yes, in a way, yeah, I know some of you might like blood pudding or something like that. It's gross. But
That's what I was thinking.
yeah, I mean, yeah, so there's certain things that yeah, but I would say absolutely, because why would we say it's not required? I mean, it says it is.
So it wasn't just because it would have caused offense to the Jewish neighbors in that context?
Well, yeah, I just think we start reading it way too superficially if we start talking about offense to a certain individual, because it's going right back to the law, and the law is talking about cleanliness and the land and the temple. I mean, you see everything through land, temple, people. I mean, that's just covenantal through and through, and it's not just covenantal; it's like the law, and that's what we're exegeting. So. Is that helpful?
Yeah, thanks.
Other questions?
Just a comment. When I think of the gathering together, I think of the synergy or synagogue. Mm-hmm. And when I think of that, I think we're gathered together in unity as one. And together as one, we are worshiping our Lord and Savior. So it's a picture of the end times when we're with Him. We see them in Revelation. The gathering together under the temple and praying. And it's a picture of where we will be gathered in the future. So, and I was wondering, was that word used in the Acts, like the synagogue?
Synago is,
Synago, yeah.
Synago. A lot of soon words, like the coming together words, but synago. Very common word in the New Testament. I mean, it's used quite a bit in Acts, but very common for coming together. But it's not simply used for the church. There's all kind of synagoing happening of other people. I would say, though, that one thing that surprised me on that was that almost every time I saw gathering, at the end of the gathering, there was some type of mission. There was always a going out. And I think I'm always talking to my congregation. I'm giving them the blessing. It's a blessing to give you the power to undergird your mission for this week. And I actually make them reach their arms forward so they're actually like participating. But yeah, mission's happening. You gather so that you can go. Anyway. Yep.
So this summer, for our youth, they're doing just kind of topical stuff, and they asked me as the pastor to talk to them about the importance of being a part of the church. So if you were going to speak to a youth group about the importance of being part of the church, from your research, what points would you hit with them?
The importance of being a part of the church. I would begin that this is the place. So usually what I begin is personal, so pastorally. So this isn't quite a theological answer or necessarily a structured answer in that way. But I would begin with the churches where I have encountered Christ. And where, the church is where I was baptized, where I received promises, and where a community saw that promise administered to me and has been faithful. Imperfect but faithful in holding me within that promise and helping me realize what that promise means, and who celebrated with me as I've come to a fullness of faith and celebrated the Spirit. So I've encountered Christ in this community. This is a community also because we believe in the reality of heaven and hell. This is a community with the promise of heaven. We're united to Christ. And he who is ahead will see us through. But if we're not a part of this ark, like 1 Peter 3 kind of language, if we're not a part of this ark and we're on the outside, that's where the waters of judgment are. Baptism not only is a sign of promise for God's people, but it's also, in the 1 Peter 3 sense, a sign of warning against the ungodly and those outside the church who stand opposed to her. So outside the church, there's just, you're getting into some deep and dangerous waters. And you can be very pastoral and, obvious, you can use all sorts of different illustrations to speak about that. Put on the full armor of God. It's a you plural command in Ephesians, for example. And it's not a lone soldier going out alone, but it's a y'all plural. Put on the armor of God together, because the lone soldier alone is going to get picked off.
I like use guys. Use guys.
Together, by grace, we're in a community that's united to Christ, where there are promises, where there is sacramental experience and the presence of the Lord, an encounter, where there is shared joy and shared grief, throughout life. That's another thing is a teenager can't think yet. I couldn't. I'll speak in I terms. I could not, as a teenager, think about being 50 or 60 or 70 or 80 or 90, and how desperately I would need people to remind me of the one hope to which I'm called, when the promises of retirement will look a lot more promising, and when I'm dying and cancer is ravaging my body, how badly I'll need to know that I have a resurrection hope, and that's steady and true, and that has been proclaimed throughout generations and held to. So I think there's, and the Psalms and the spiritual encouragement that comes in that community are just so essential for a lifetime of flourishing. So I don't know, those are some things that I would say extemporaneously.
Yeah, I just to add, not even add, but agree. Union with Christ, body of Christ lessons, I think, are wonderful, because I think I think of Mr. Potato Head in Toy Story. And I remember when Mrs. Potato Head left her eye back at Andy's under his bed, and she went like this to her other eye, and she's like, "Oh, Andy's about to leave." Or you guys know, you have kids? I mean, I've seen it like 1,000 times. But I'm like, that doesn't work. But for the churches that don't encourage and exhort people to become members of the local manifestation of the union or body of Christ, they're like Mr. Potato Head who ends up on a tortilla shell and is like walking out in the. It doesn't work that way. It's you are put together. You are a body. An eye doesn't work outside of its commitment to being part of the body. So, but I mean, this, as Dave knows, I mean, this is an active conversation we're having on session. What does membership look like? Do we need to have membership? I mean, the marriage analogy just goes a long way. For those who have a really low ecclesiology and would say, you don't really need to be members to be part of the body of Christ at a local church, I'm like, that's good. What would your wife think about what you just said if you said, we don't really need to be married to live together? That brings them up to speed, I feel like, oftentimes. So.
Can I jump in real quick?
Yes, please.
I'm doing bird walking a little bit off topic, but this
maybe.
Conversation, maybe, all right.
Yeah.
This conversation we just had the other day. So I'm not a member of my church.
Uh-huh.
Haven't been for a number of decades now, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen people in our church who were members come and go. And my wife's from Colorado, and she used to tell me the prairie culture would have an itinerant preacher come by, not often enough, so you'd have to get married when you could, and there was common law marriage. You jump a broom to show publicly we're married now. Apparently that's good enough in Colorado. So you can have a common law marriage, and that's my reference to how I am with my church.
So I just talk about, generally when I get into it, because it's an active and very dynamic and nuanced conversation, I talk in terms of best practice. What's best practice? You know what I mean? And so that's what we're always aiming at, is best practice. We live by grace. But, because we have some very committed volunteers at our church that are not members. And you talk to them about it, come alongside of them, and if they're resistant to it, it's kind of like, what am I going to do,
I was just going to interject a last comment on that, and just to tie back to the beauty of the church and what we see in her. If you see the beauty of the church, if you see Christ's presence in us, if you see her in all that beauty, as you might have seen in incredible beauty at one point in your past, and you made some wild promises to her that you've never kept perfectly. When you see the beauty of the church, you might be drawn, and I hope you'll be drawn to make some wild promises that you're keeping perfectly.
That's a good point. Yeah.
But if you would stand with me, let's sing just 2 verses. And if you don't know it, it's okay. You can be like C.S. Lewis, who didn't like the song. But the church is one foundation. If you'll just join me in singing the first and last verse, I'll try to remember the words if you'll help me remember them.
The church is one foundation, is Jesus Christ her Lord. She is His new creation by water and the Word. From heaven He came and sought her to be His holy bride. And with His blood He bought her, and for her life He died.
Yet she on earth hath union.
Yes, she on earth hath union with God the Three in One, and mystic sweet communion with those whose rest is won. Oh, happy ones and holy, Lord, give us grace that we, like them, the weak and holy, on high may dwell with Thee.
God bless you all.
Hey guys, don't forget, Purchase your copy of The Beauty of